Oh, in 1962, they brought a newsreel, and they showed the newsreel. In this newsreel, you could see Patrice Lumumba being arrested. He doesn't know if it's 1962 or 1963. But he had the soldiers, they arrested him in the back of a truck. And they had tied his hands in his back. And the soldiers had a piece of paper and they shoved it in his mouth. And he was the projectionist, he forgot about the projector. And this was just overwhelmed him. He was completely out of himself. It was that day he realized what he could do with cinema. He could do big things with cinema. To really say, I like cinema, it was on that day.
Well, there are so many channels now, but there are channels for hair. There's channels for fingernails. Anyway, at that time they had channels for cinema. It was amazing. So 1 in the morning, I saw an image from his film, Yemen. And I just stopped, and 2 hours later, it was 3:15 in the morning, and I had been awake, and I had one of the greatest experiences, cinematic experiences in my life. And I really hadn't been that aware of the films that came out of Mali or Senegal or other parts of Africa. And so I became very, usually if in my mind I discovered, I was a little late apparently, but I discovered for myself his cinema, and I started to tell all my friends about it. I got copies of it, acquired a 35mm print, screened it, and that sort of thing. And I think it was 2005. I went to Paris to do the keynote speech for the opening of the new French Cinematheque, and a screening of the restored version of The River, Jean Renoir's The River, which the Film Foundation helped do. And in the speech, I point out about the importance of the availability and the exposure of cinema from all over the world, feeling a sense of being cut off here in America to a certain extent because of distribution. Coming out of a time in my life when I started making short films at a time when foreign cinema was something that was not only distributed, but also were household names, basically Fellini, Antonioni, the British cinema, Truffaut, Godard, were household names. Everybody knew them. And a few years later, within a decade, the word got around that audiences didn't like to read subtitles. And so foreign cinema disappeared again until Harvey Weinstein brought it back. But then again, I missed the excitement of the discovery, the excitement of seeing, let's say, Sajid Ray's film on television, Pate Panchali. I was 15 years old and I saw it on TV. And it was the first time I had seen a film of India made by Indians, not by British, not by Americans, not seen through our eyes, not seen through eyes of others, really opening up a whole of the world to me. Somehow all of this contributes, I feel, to the enrichment of being alive, being the human experience. It all addresses the human condition, and our culture becomes more enriched by seeing these films. Particularly, the waves may be over in Europe for now. There are still some interesting things happening, but the major waves from the early 60s and late 50s are long gone, but other parts of the world, as we know, many of you here, are being heard from. The problem is getting them shown and sharing the excitement of these pictures, sharing the excitement of these visions and these cultures, which I think is for the long run, for our children, really. And quite honestly, I just get excited when I see a damn good movie. I think it's good. Anyway, there's only a few. It's his films and one or two since then that I felt that I could go out and talk about and really champion. But as I was making the speech in Paris, I mentioned his film, and he was sitting there. And so we met afterwards, and around the same time started the World Cinema Foundation, which is the idea of that foundation, along with the board of directors, all the Souleymane and Hermano Olmi and Fatih Akin and Bertrand Tavernier, Kiarostami, many others. Along that idea of the World Cinema Foundation is to help find, first of all, and restore films from countries that are not able to have the ability, let's say, certain countries in Europe, England, and also America, the labs to restore, the finances, and also the storage, and this sort of thing. How do you begin? Because it's an extraordinarily vast field. Well, the idea was to ask all the members of the board and to see, we know, myself and Schrader and Brian De Palma and Spielberg and all of us in the 70s, we knew the films that have influenced us or we happened to refer to or state in our memory in American films. And so over the years, we've been able to get most of those saved. But what about Fatih Akin's inspiration and Souleymane's inspiration? What about the films that they saw that inspired them? And so it's become a situation where we do a number of films a year, and basically a lot of it's detective work. I know that Fatih Akin, for example, had one film in mind called Dry Summer, and it was made in Turkey in the 60s, in Istanbul. And there was only one copy in the producer's closet in Istanbul, and he refused to show it to anyone. And so Fatih had to go there personally to implore him to give us the copy, to go to Gianluca Farinelli in Bologna, and they'll restore, that's where most of the restorations are being done. And then it was shown in Cannes. We usually use Cannes as a base for these films. The next step with these films is to get them distributed. In the meantime, at Cannes, Souleymane asked me to come to Mali, and I was able to do it after, I forget, it was about 3 years ago. It was in December, and I spent 3 days there. It was a remarkable time, and that's when he showed me the possibility of building an archive for West African cinema. And so since then, we've been trying, A, to get his films distributed and shown, to spread the word about African cinema. Because as Souleymane said that day in Cannes, he said, if we don't save or start to try to find and save and conserve the cinema of Africans by Africans that really began in the 60s, I guess, with Senben, the generations to come will never know that they existed.